My name is Erin, and I'm 32 years old. I've built a successful career as a software engineer at one of the biggest tech companies in the country. But when I was 7, my mother walked out on me and my dad for a wealthier man and her chance at a perfect new family. After 15 years of complete silence, she suddenly reappeared in my life with a shocking demand. She wanted me to pay college tuition for the half-siblings I'd never even met. The audacity left me speechless, torn between family obligation and self-respect. Before I get into my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you've ever had to stand up to family members who took you for granted, hit that subscribe button. My earliest memories are filled with warmth despite our modest circumstances. We lived in a small 2-bedroom house in a working-class neighborhood of Seattle. The paint was peeling in places and the floors creaked, but it was home. My dad, James, worked long hours as an auto mechanic at a local garage. His hands were always stained with grease that never quite washed off no matter how hard he scrubbed. I remember sitting on a stool in our tiny kitchen watching him try to remove the stubborn black lines around his fingernails before dinner. Mom Diana waited tables part-time at a family restaurant downtown. When I was very young, around 4 or 5, she seemed content with our life. She would come home from her shifts with small treats she'd saved from the restaurant, a cookie or a piece of pie wrapped in a napkin. Her eyes would light up when she presented these treasures to me, and we'd share them at the kitchen table while she asked about my day. Money was always tight. I remember overhearing hushed conversations between my parents about bills, especially in winter when the heating costs went up. But despite the financial struggles, there was love in our home. On weekends, we'd go to the public park where Dad would push me on the swings for what felt like hours. Mom would pack sandwiches and fruit in a cooler, and we'd have picnics on a blanket spread on the grass. Those days felt perfect to me. Dad was the one who first sparked my interest in how things work. He'd sometimes take me to the garage on Saturdays when they weren't too busy. I'd watch in fascination as he diagnosed problems with cars, explaining to me in simple terms what each part did. "See this, Erin? This is the alternator. It's like the heart of the car's electrical system," he'd say, pointing to components under the hood. I'd nod seriously, absorbing everything. When I was 6, he gave me a small toolkit of my own and taught me how to change a tire on his old Ford. The pride in his eyes when I completed the task all by myself is something I can still see clearly when I close my eyes. I think the first signs of Mom's restlessness appeared when I was about 6 years old. She started coming home later from her shifts, claiming she had to help close the restaurant. The treats stopped coming. She began spending more time on her appearance, buying new clothes and makeup that stretched our already tight budget. I remember Dad questioning a credit card bill one night, his voice tight with worry rather than anger. "Diana, we can't afford these charges," he said quietly after he thought I was asleep. I had crept to the top of the stairs to listen, a childhood habit I developed whenever their voices became tense. "I can't keep wearing the same 3 outfits to work, James," she snapped back. "Do you have any idea how the other women dress? I look like someone's grandmother." "We're doing the best we can," Dad replied, his voice weary. "Maybe in a few months when I get that promotion." "It's always a few months with you," Mom interrupted. "A few months has turned into years and nothing changes." Their arguments increased in frequency and volume over the following months. Mom spent more and more time away from home, picking up extra shifts that stretched late into the evening. Dad tried to shield me from their problems, but I wasn't oblivious. I noticed how Mom's face had changed, how her smiles rarely reached her eyes anymore when she looked at Dad or our home. Then Richard entered the picture. I didn't know who he was at first, just that Mom mentioned a new regular customer at the restaurant who left generous tips and asked for her section specifically. Dad seemed uncomfortable whenever she brought up this customer, but never said anything directly to her about it. I was too young to understand the significance, but I felt the tension in the air like an electrical current. Mom began to change her appearance even more dramatically. She dyed her light brown hair blonde and started wearing more jewelry. She lost weight she didn't need to lose. One day, she came home with a shopping bag full of new clothes that I'd never seen before, far nicer than anything she'd owned previously. "Where did those come from?" Dad asked, his voice carefully neutral. Just a little bonus from work, she answered breezily, not meeting his eyes. I tried desperately to make Mom happy during this time. I drew her pictures, picked wildflowers from the vacant lot next to our house, and tried to help more around the home. Sometimes she would respond with momentary warmth, scooping me into a quick hug before setting me aside to get ready to go out. Other times, she barely seemed to notice my efforts, her mind clearly elsewhere. I blamed myself, thinking if I could just be better, smarter, prettier, more helpful, she would want to stay home with us more. I didn't know then that nothing I could have done would have been enough. The problem wasn't me, or even Dad. The problem was that Mom had decided she wanted something else entirely, something we could never give her. The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I went to school, learned about fractions in math class, and painted a picture of our family in art period. The teacher praised my work, and I couldn't wait to show it to Mom. I clutched that painting all the way home on the school bus, careful not to bend or smudge it. When I walked through our front door calling out, "I'm home," as usual, something felt immediately different. The house had a strange emptiness to it, an unusual silence that made my voice echo slightly. Mom's car was in the driveway, but Dad's wasn't, which was unusual for that time of day. I found Mom in their bedroom methodically packing clothes into a large suitcase. At first I thought we must be going on a trip, though no one had mentioned anything about travel. "Mom, look what I made for you in art class today." I held out the still damp painting, pride momentarily overriding my confusion about the suitcase. She glanced at it briefly, her expression unreadable. "That's nice, Erin. Put it on the dresser." Deflated but still hopeful for approval, I carefully placed my artwork where she indicated. "Are we going somewhere?" I asked, watching her fold a sweater I'd never seen before into the suitcase. Mom stopped what she was doing and sat on the edge of the bed. For a moment she looked uncertain, almost vulnerable. Then her face hardened into a mask of determination. "I'm going somewhere, Erin. You're staying here with your father." I remember feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. "But why? When will you be back?" "I need more from life than this." She gestured vaguely around the modest bedroom. "Your father and I want different things. I've met someone who can give me the life I deserve." I didn't understand what she meant, but panic began rising in my chest. "Take me with you," I pleaded, grabbing her hand. She extracted her fingers from mine gently but firmly. "That's not possible. Richard and I are starting fresh. You belong with your father. He's a good man and he'll take care of you." "But you're my mom," I whispered, tears beginning to spill down my cheeks. For a brief moment, something like regret flashed across her face. She reached out and brushed my hair back from my forehead. "I'll call you soon, and maybe you can visit sometimes when we're settled." That promise, like so many others she would make over the years, was empty. She never called. There were no visits. Dad came home an hour after Mom left. A neighbor had been asked to stay with me until he arrived, but I was inconsolable. When Dad walked through the door and saw my tear-streaked face, he immediately knew. "She's gone?" he asked quietly, his shoulders slumping as I nodded. He knelt down and gathered me into a tight hug. I could feel him trembling, trying to control his own emotions for my sake. "We'll be okay, Pumpkin," he whispered into my hair. "Dad's got you. We'll be okay." But we weren't okay, not for a long time. The first few weeks after Mom left were a blur of pain and confusion. I waited by the phone every day after school, certain that today would be the day she'd call as promised. Dad would find me there, homework untouched, when he came home from work. The phone did ring occasionally with concerned relatives and neighbors. Dad would answer, his voice steady as he assured them we were managing, but I'd catch him later sitting alone in the dark living room, his head in his hands. He thought I couldn't hear his muffled sobs, but the walls in our small house were thin. Dad did his best to maintain normalcy. He learned to cook basic meals, though we ate a lot of macaroni and cheese and sandwiches those first months. He made sure I got to school on time, my clothes were clean, and I had everything I needed for classes. But there was only so much one person could do while working full-time. Our community stepped in to help. Mrs. Garcia from next door started inviting me over after school until Dad got home. She taught me to make tortillas and practiced Spanish with me while we cooked. Mr. Wilson from across the street, a retired teacher, would mow our lawn without being asked. Dad's sister, Aunt Beth, came over on weekends to help with deeper cleaning and to stock our freezer with homemade meals. About a month after Mom left, I overheard Dad on the phone with Aunt Beth. "She's living with him now in some fancy house on Mercer Island," he said, his voice hollow. "No, she hasn't called Aaron, not once." I learned through bits of adult conversations that Richard was some kind of business executive. He had met Mom at the restaurant and pursued her aggressively, showing her glimpses of a life of luxury she'd never had. He had no children of his own, and from what I gathered, no interest in raising someone else's child. School became difficult in a new way. Somehow, word had gotten out about my mother leaving. Children can be cruelly direct. "My mom says your mom ran away with a rich guy," one girl said during recess, not maliciously, but with the tactless curiosity of a child. "Is that why you're wearing the same jeans every day?" I stopped raising my hand in class, trying to make myself invisible. My grades began to suffer. My teacher called Dad in for a conference expressing concern about my withdrawal and declining performance. Dad added, "helping with homework," to his already overwhelming list of responsibilities. The first Christmas without Mom was especially hard. Dad tried his best putting up our artificial tree and hanging the ornaments, many of which Mom had collected over the years. Each one seemed to hold a memory that stabbed at my heart. Dad must have felt it too, but he maintained a cheerful facade for my sake, playing Christmas music and baking cookies from pre-made dough. He couldn't afford many presents that year, but he saved up to buy me a telescope, knowing I'd developed an interest in astronomy at school. "The stars are always there, Aaron," he told me as we set it up in the backyard on Christmas night. "No matter what changes down here, you can count on them." As months passed without any contact from Mom, I developed intense abandonment issues. I became anxious whenever Dad was late coming home from work, convinced he too would disappear. I made him promise repeatedly that he would never leave me. "Wild horses couldn't drag me away from you, Pumpkin," he would assure me, pulling me into a tight hug. About a year after Mom left, Dad found me crying in my room, clutching the society pages of the newspaper. There, in black and white, was a photo of Mom and Richard at their wedding. She looked radiant in an elegant white dress, diamonds sparkling at her throat and ears. The caption mentioned that Diana Williams, formerly Diana Miller, had wed businessman Richard Williams in an exclusive ceremony in Victoria, British Columbia. Dad gently took the paper from my hands. "I'm so sorry, Aaron," he said, his own voice thick with emotion. "She looks happy," I whispered. "Happier than when she was with us." Dad pulled me into his arms. "Her happiness isn't your responsibility, Pumpkin. And her leaving had nothing to do with you. Some grown-ups make selfish choices." Over the next few years, we would occasionally hear news of Mom through the grapevine of distant relatives or mutual acquaintances. She had a baby boy, then another, and eventually a girl. She never reached out to share these milestones with me directly. I had half-siblings I'd never met growing up in luxury, while Dad took on extra shifts at the garage to pay for my school clothes and supplies. Dad worked himself to exhaustion during those years. He never complained, but I would see him wincing as he stretched his back after long days hunched over engines. He took on side jobs, repairing neighbors' cars on weekends to make ends meet. His hands, always rough from work, developed deep cracks that would sometimes bleed in the winter months. Despite everything, he never spoke ill of Mom to me. "She's still your mother," he would say when I expressed anger about her abandonment. "Someday, you might want a relationship with her, and I don't want my words to stand in the way." His grace and dignity in the face of such betrayal was a lesson I wouldn't fully appreciate until much later. By the time I turned 13, Dad and I had established our own rhythm of life. I'd become more independent out of necessity, getting myself ready for school in the mornings, while Dad caught a few extra minutes of much-needed sleep. I packed our lunches, started dinner in the slow cooker before leaving for school, and handled my own laundry. Dad worried that I was growing up too fast, taking on adult responsibilities when I should be enjoying childhood. "You should be hanging out with friends, not worrying about making dinner," he would say. But I didn't mind. Taking care of our home gave me a sense of control when so much in my life had been uncontrollable. School had become my sanctuary. I threw myself into academics, particularly excelling in math and science. The ordered world of numbers and logical problems was comforting, a space where correct answers existed and could be found through methodical work. I could disappear into equations and formulas, temporarily escaping the emotional chaos that still lingered from Mom's abandonment. In 8th grade, I was fortunate to have Ms. Thompson for advanced math. She noticed my aptitude and began giving me extra problems to solve, challenging me beyond the regular curriculum. She stayed after school to work with me when I wanted to learn more, never making me feel like I was imposing on her time. One afternoon, when I was struggling with a particularly difficult concept, she asked about my interest in mathematics. I explained how I found peace in its certainty. "Numbers don't leave you," I said without thinking. "They're always exactly what they claim to be." Ms. Thompson's eyes softened with understanding. Somehow she had learned about my mother's departure. Rather than offering empty platitudes, she simply said, "Mathematics rewards persistence, Aaron. So does life." Ms. Thompson became more than a teacher to me. She was a mentor and in many ways a mother figure who helped fill the void Diana had left. She encouraged me to join the math team and later suggested I learn computer programming, recognizing that my logical thinking would translate well to coding. Under her guidance, I created a computer program that simulated ecosystem changes for the science fair in 9th grade. I spent countless hours writing and debugging code on the school's computers since we couldn't afford one at home. The project won first place, and the local newspaper ran a small article about it, complete with a photo of me standing proudly next to my display. Dad framed that newspaper clipping and hung it on our refrigerator. "I always knew you were brilliant," he told me, his voice catching with emotion. "You can do anything you set your mind to, pumpkin." His unwavering faith in me became my foundation when self-doubt crept in. The summer after 9th grade, I was shopping with Dad at the mall, a rare treat as we usually bought clothes at thrift stores. We had a little extra money from Dad's tax return, and he insisted on getting me new jeans and sneakers for the upcoming school year. As we were leaving the food court after sharing a pretzel, I froze. There, not 20 feet away, was my mother. She looked even more polished than in her wedding photo, her blonde hair now cut in an expensive-looking bob. She was surrounded by 3 well-dressed children and a tall man I recognized as Richard from the newspaper photos. They were all laughing, shopping bags from high-end stores dangling from their arms. Time seemed to stop as our eyes met across the crowded mall. I saw recognition flash across her face, followed immediately by something like panic. She quickly turned away, ushering her perfect new family in the opposite direction, pretending she hadn't seen me at all. Dad realized what had happened and put his arm around my shoulders. "Let's go home," he said gently. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. In the car, the tears finally came. "She pretended not to know me," I sobbed. "I'm her daughter, and she acted like I was a stranger." Dad pulled over and held me while I cried. "Her loss," he said firmly. "Anyone who can't see what an amazing young woman you are doesn't deserve to know you." That encounter reopened wounds I thought had begun to heal. Nightmares about abandonment returned. I became even more determined to succeed academically, as if achievements could somehow make me worthy of the love my mother had withheld. Around this time, I began to notice that Dad didn't look well. The lines around his eyes had deepened, and he seemed perpetually exhausted. He brushed off my concerns, blaming long hours at the garage, but I suspected it was more than that. Years of physical labor and emotional stress were taking their toll. When I was 16, I got a part-time job at a local bookstore. Dad initially resisted wanting me to focus on school, but I insisted. "We could use the extra money," I pointed out, "and I can still maintain my grades." In truth, I had seen Dad looking worried as he paid the bills. I'd noticed him putting things back on store shelves that we used to be able to afford. My small paycheck helped with groceries and utilities, easing some of the financial burden he'd carried alone for so long. That year, I formed a close friendship with Samantha, a new girl at school who understood family pain in a way most of my peers couldn't. Her parents had gone through a bitter divorce, and she lived with her father who struggled with depression. We recognized in each other the premature maturity that comes from growing up too quickly. "We're the responsible ones," she said one day as we studied together in the library. "The ones who make sure the adults are okay instead of the other way around." I nodded, feeling understood in a way I rarely did with other teenagers. They worried about prom dates and popularity. I worried about whether Dad was taking his blood pressure medication and if we could afford new tires for the car before winter. With Samantha's friendship and Dad's unwavering support, I navigated the complexities of high school while maintaining my focus on the future. I researched colleges with strong computer science programs determined to build a secure life where I'd never have to depend on anyone who might abandon me again. Senior year brought the excitement and stress of college applications. I applied to several state schools with strong computer science programs, knowing that private universities were financially out of reach despite my excellent grades and test scores. Dad insisted I apply for every scholarship available, spending evenings at the kitchen table, helping me edit essays even when he was exhausted from work. When the acceptance letters came in spring, I had several options to choose from. The most exciting was a full-ride academic scholarship to the state university, which had one of the best computer science departments in the region. The day the scholarship letter arrived, Dad took me out for dinner at an actual restaurant, something we rarely did. "I am so proud of you," he said, raising his water glass in a toast. "You've worked so hard for this, and you deserve every success coming your way." I smiled, but felt a twinge of guilt. "I don't want to leave you alone," I admitted. Dad had been my constant, my rock for so long. The thought of not seeing him every day made my stomach twist with anxiety. "Hey." He reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "This is exactly what parents want to see their kids fly. I'll be fine and you'll be just 90 minutes away by bus. We'll see each other plenty." Despite his reassurances, I planned my college schedule, carefully arranging classes so I could come home every weekend. I'd take the Friday afternoon bus back to Seattle, spend the weekend helping around the house and enjoying time with Dad, then return to campus Sunday evening. This routine worked well during my freshman year. I thrived academically, discovering a passion for software development that consumed me. The structured nature of coding, the satisfaction of solving complex problems, felt like an extension of the mathematical refuge I'd found in high school. Meanwhile, I made sure Dad wasn't neglecting his health or the house. I'd stock the refrigerator before leaving on Sundays, do laundry, and clean. Dad would protest that I should be enjoying college life, not acting as his housekeeper, but I could see the relief in his eyes when he came home to a clean house and prepared meals after long work weeks. In my sophomore year, I connected with a professor who ran a competitive internship program with technology companies. She recognized my abilities and encouraged me to apply. "You have a natural talent for this field," she told me after reviewing my project work. "You should be positioning yourself for the best opportunities." With her recommendation, I secured a part-time internship at a growing tech firm while continuing my studies. The position paid well enough that I could send money home to Dad, though I had to be careful about how I presented this to him. His pride wouldn't allow him to accept direct financial help from his daughter, so I found creative ways to contribute, like prepaying bills or arriving with groceries already purchased. During this time, I maintained my friendship with Samantha, who was attending a different college, but still made time to meet up when I was in Seattle. I also stayed in touch with Ms. Thompson, occasionally returning to my old high school to talk with her about my college experiences. Everything seemed to be falling into place until the spring of my junior year. I came home one weekend to find Dad looking more tired than usual, with a persistent cough he tried to dismiss as just a cold. "You've had that cough for weeks," I said, concern growing as I noticed how his clothes seemed looser. "Have you seen a doctor?" "Been too busy at work," he deflected. "But I'll go soon, promise." I made the appointment myself and insisted on accompanying him the following weekend. The doctor listened to Dad's lungs, ordered chest x-rays, and scheduled follow-up tests. 2 weeks later, we received the devastating diagnosis: stage 3 lung cancer. Years of exposure to automotive chemicals and exhaust, combined with the occasional cigarette during his younger years, had damaged his lungs significantly. I immediately took a leave of absence from school and moved back home. Dad protested vehemently, insisting I shouldn't interrupt my education, but I was adamant. "You took care of me my whole life," I told him. "Now it's my turn." The next months were a blur of doctor appointments, chemotherapy treatments, and learning to navigate the Byzantine American healthcare system. Even with Dad's basic insurance from work, the medical bills quickly became overwhelming. I continued my internship, remotely grateful for a progressive employer who allowed the flexibility, but the stress of caregiving, working, and trying to keep up with some coursework online was immense. Samantha became an invaluable support, stopping by regularly with home-cooked meals, or simply sitting with Dad so I could take a much-needed shower or nap. Ms. Thompson organized a meal train among teachers and former students, ensuring we had dinner delivered several times a week. Throughout this ordeal, we never heard from my mother, though the news of Dad's illness had surely reached her through mutual acquaintances. Her absence during this critical time confirmed what I had long suspected: she had completely excised us from her life, regardless of our circumstances. After 6 months of grueling treatment, Dad's oncologist delivered cautiously good news. The cancer had responded to treatment and was in remission. He would need regular monitoring, and his energy might never fully return to pre-cancer levels, but he had a good chance of several more years of life. As Dad began to recover, he became increasingly insistent that I return to school. "You're so close to finishing," he argued. "I'm doing better now, and you've put your life on hold long enough." I was torn. The idea of leaving him alone again terrified me, especially knowing the cancer could return at any moment. But I also recognized the truth in his words. I was just a year away from completing my degree, and the internship was leading toward a full-time job offer upon graduation. "I want to see you walk across that stage and get your diploma," Dad said, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I want to know that whatever happens to me, you're prepared for a good life." How could I deny him that? With tremendous reluctance, I arranged to return to university for my senior year. I found a reliable home health aide to check on Dad daily, set up grocery delivery, and organized his medications in clearly labeled weekly containers. I also scheduled my classes to allow for extended weekends at home. During that final year of college, I pushed myself to excel, knowing that my academic and professional success was a gift I could give my father. I wanted him to see that his sacrifices, his years of working multiple jobs and putting me first, had paid off. I wanted him to know that I would be okay, that he had equipped me with everything I needed to thrive. I graduated with honors in computer science, walking across the stage to receive my diploma, while Dad cheered from the audience, thinner than before, but beaming with pride. The tech company where I'd interned offered me a full-time position with a starting salary that seemed unimaginable given our years of financial struggle. My first priority after accepting the job was finding an apartment in Seattle where Dad could live with me. I found a ground-floor 2-bedroom unit in a building with an elevator, knowing that stairs had become difficult for him during treatment. It was closer to the hospital for his follow-up appointments and offered amenities like in-unit laundry that would make his life easier. "This is too much," Dad protested when he saw the apartment. "You should be enjoying your independence, not taking care of your old man." "It's not too much," I assured him. "And I want you close by. We're a team, remember." Those first months post-graduation were precious. Dad was feeling relatively well, and we settled into a comfortable routine. I would go to work at my new job, thriving in the challenging environment of software development, while Dad would rest, read, and occasionally meet friends for coffee. In the evenings, we'd cook dinner together and watch old movies, something we'd always enjoyed. On weekends, when Dad felt up to it, we'd explore Seattle neighborhoods we'd never had time to visit before, try new restaurants, a luxury we could finally afford, or simply sit in parks enjoying the fresh air. These simple pleasures meant everything after the years of struggle and recent health scares. I began building a social circle at work, making friends with fellow software engineers who respected my abilities and invited me to gatherings. Dad encouraged these connections, insisting I not cancel plans to stay home with him. "You need people your own age," he'd say. "I'm not going anywhere." Over time, I developed especially close friendships with three colleagues, Michael, Aisha, and David, who became like family to us. They would come over for dinner, genuinely enjoying Dad's company and his stories from the auto shop. When I needed to travel for work, they would check in on him bringing groceries or just stopping by for conversation. "You've built yourself a good chosen family," Dad remarked after one such dinner party at our apartment. "That's a special skill, knowing how to find the good ones." For nearly 2 years, we enjoyed this period of relative stability and peace. I advanced at work, taking on more responsibility and receiving raises that further secured our financial situation. Dad's health seemed stable, with scans showing no evidence of cancer's return. Then came the cough again, this time accompanied by chest pain that couldn't be ignored. The oncologist's expression told us everything before he even spoke. The cancer had returned more aggressive than before, spreading to his lymph nodes and bones. "We can try another round of treatment," the doctor explained gently. "But I want to be honest about the prognosis. This is likely terminal, though we may be able to extend quality time." Dad listened calmly, asking practical questions about side effects and success rates. I sat beside him, gripping his hand so tightly, my knuckles turned white, fighting back tears that wouldn't help him now. In the car afterward, he turned to me with unexpected serenity. "I'm not afraid, Erin," he said softly. "I've lived to see you become an incredible woman. I've had the privilege of being your dad. That's more than enough for one lifetime." We decided together that he would undergo some treatment to manage symptoms and potentially extend his time, but not the most aggressive options that would leave him debilitated during his remaining months. Quality of life became our focus. I took family leave from work, grateful for a company policy that allowed me to be with Dad without financial worry. We spent days talking about everything and nothing, conversations we might never have had without the urgency of limited time. He shared stories from his youth that I'd never heard, advised me about finances and home repairs, and repeatedly assured me that I would be okay without him. "You're stronger than you know," he told me one evening as we watched the sunset from our small balcony. "You've always been the strongest person I've ever met, even as a little girl." "I learned it from you," I replied, fighting back tears. "Everything good in me came from you." He shook his head. "No, pumpkin. It was always there. I just tried not to get in its way." As Dad grew weaker, we had the difficult conversation about his funeral wishes. He wanted something simple, no religious service, but a gathering where people could share stories and remember good times. "And don't waste money on an expensive coffin," he insisted. "Wood returns to the earth just fine without fancy linings." During one particularly lucid evening about a month before the end, Dad brought up my mother, something he rarely did. "I want you to know something," he said, his voice weaker, but his eyes clear. "I've never regretted a day of raising you, not even after your mom left. The only thing I regret is that I couldn't shield you from that pain." "You gave me everything I needed," I assured him, holding his increasingly fragile hand. "She missed out," he continued, "on knowing the amazing person you've become. That's her loss, not yours. Don't let her absence define you." Dad passed peacefully in his sleep 3 weeks later, with me asleep in the chair beside his hospital bed. The nurses told me that's often how it happens, as if the dying wait until loved ones are resting to quietly slip away. The funeral was exactly as he wanted, a simple gathering at a local community center. I was overwhelmed by how many people came to honor him. Mechanics from the garage, neighbors from our old neighborhood, my friends from work, former teachers. Each person had a story about Dad's kindness, his integrity, his quiet strength. "Your father fixed my car for free when I lost my job." One woman told me, tears in her eyes. "He never mentioned it, just said to pay it forward when I could." "He called me every week after my wife died," an elderly man from our old neighborhood shared. "Just to check in, see if I needed anything. Who does that anymore?" My mother did not attend the funeral. She sent no card, no flowers, made no acknowledgement of the passing of a man she had once loved enough to marry and have a child with. Her absence, while expected, still stung. The months after Dad's death were a fog of grief. I returned to work, going through the motions professionally while feeling hollow inside. My friends rallied around me, making sure I wasn't alone for too long, bringing food when I forgot to eat. listening when I needed to talk and respecting my silence when I didn't. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the acute pain began to transform into something more manageable. I started a support group for young adults who had lost parents, finding comfort in the shared experience and in helping others navigate their grief. I established a small scholarship in Dad's name at the trade school, where he had learned his mechanic skills to help students who needed financial assistance. Life took on a new normal. I threw myself into challenging projects at work, earning a significant promotion. I sold the apartment that held too many memories and bought a small house with a garden, something Dad had always wanted but never had. I planted vegetables and learned to make his favorite foods, keeping his memory alive in small personal ways. Through it all, I never heard a word from my mother. According to occasional updates from distant relatives, she was still living her comfortable life with Richard and their children, completely disconnected from the daughter she had abandoned decades before. I told myself I had made peace with her absence. I had my career, my friends, my memories of Dad. I didn't need anything from the woman who had walked away so easily. I believed that most of the time, until the day her name appeared in my email inbox, shattering the carefully constructed equilibrium of my life. It was an ordinary Wednesday at work. I had spent the morning deep in code solving a particularly complex problem for a new application we were developing. At lunch, I checked my personal email, expecting nothing more important than retail promotions or updates from the neighborhood association. The name in my inbox stopped my breath. Diana Williams. Subject line, reaching out after all these years. My hand trembled slightly as I opened the email, my heart racing with a confusing mixture of anger, curiosity, and a childlike hope I thought I'd outgrown. My dearest Erin, the message began, already striking a false note. When had I ever been her dearest anything? I hope this message finds you well. I've thought about you so often over the years, wondering how your life has unfolded. A mutual acquaintance mentioned your success in the technology field, and I felt such maternal pride knowing you've done so well for yourself. Maternal pride. From someone who hadn't bothered to call even once in 25 years, who hadn't shown up when Dad was dying of cancer, the audacity was breathtaking. The email continued, explaining that life had taken an unexpected turn. Richard's investment firm had collapsed amid allegations of mismanagement. They had lost their home on Mercer Island, their vacation properties, their social standing. She was reaching out to reconnect with family during this difficult time. My hands shook as I read the final paragraphs. I know we have much to discuss and many years to account for. Perhaps we could meet for coffee. I'm currently staying with a friend in the Ravenna neighborhood. There's a lovely cafe on the corner of 65th and 20th that might be suitable. I have so many things to tell you about your siblings. Erin is 17 now and so bright looking at colleges for next year. Emma is 15 and an accomplished pianist, while Lucas is 12 and excelling in mathematics much like you did. They would love to meet their big sister someday. With love and hope for reconnection, your mother, Diana. I stared at the screen, unable to process the casual tone, as if she were a distant aunt who had simply lost touch, not a mother who had abandoned her child and never looked back. The email contained no apology, no acknowledgement of her absence during Dad's illness and death, no recognition of the pain she had caused. I closed my laptop without responding and tried to return to work, but concentration was impossible. My mind raced with questions and emotions. Why now? What did she really want? Was I obligated to respond at all? That evening, I called Samantha, who had remained my closest friend since high school. After listening to me read the email, she was characteristically direct. She needs something from you, Samantha said flatly. The timing is too convenient. She loses her wealthy lifestyle and suddenly remembers she has another daughter. I don't buy it for a second. Maybe she genuinely regrets her choices, I suggested, surprised to hear myself offering this possibility. Then where's the apology? Samantha countered. Where's the, I'm sorry I abandoned you, or I regret missing your entire childhood? This email reads like she's reaching out to an old college roommate, not a daughter she walked out on. She was right, of course. Even as I contemplated meeting Diana, I recognized the suspicious timing and the lack of genuine remorse in her message. I also consulted with my therapist, whom I had been seeing since Dad's death, to help process my grief. She offered a balanced perspective. Meeting her might provide closure, she suggested, but go in with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. This is about what you need, not what she wants. After days of internal debate, I decided to respond, agreeing to meet at the cafe she had suggested. If nothing else, I told myself I could put to rest the questions that had haunted me since childhood. The night before our meeting, I found myself scrolling through social media, searching for information about my half-siblings. Aaron's profile was public, showing a handsome young man with my mother's blue eyes standing beside a luxury car for his birthday. Emma's dance recital photos revealed an elegant teenager in expensive clothing. Lucas appeared in family vacation pictures on beaches and ski slopes I could never have afforded growing up. These children had been given everything I had been denied, not just material comforts, but our mother's presence and attention. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to resent them. They hadn't chosen the circumstances of their birth, just as I hadn't. The coffee shop was busy when I arrived precisely at the agreed time. I spotted Diana immediately, though she had aged since I'd glimpsed her at the mall years before. Her blonde hair was highlighted to cover gray, her clothes still expensive but showing signs of wear. She half rose from her seat, arms extending as if for a hug. I remained standing, not moving to embrace her, and after an awkward moment, she sat back down. I took the seat across from her, acutely aware of how surreal this moment was, sitting across from the woman who had given birth to me but was essentially a stranger. "You look wonderful," she began, her smile nervous but practiced. "So professional and successful." "Thank you," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "You wanted to meet." She launched into what felt like a rehearsed speech about missing me, thinking of me often being young and foolish when she left. "I was only 24, she explained, as if youth excused abandoning a child. "I didn't know who I was yet or what I really wanted." I let her talk, studying her face for traces of genuine emotion. There was anxiety there, certainly, and a kind of performative remorse, but her eyes kept darting away from mine when she spoke of the past. She asked questions about my job, my home, my social life, absorbing the answers with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. When she inquired about my salary, I deflected, asking instead about her children. This was when she became animated, pulling out her phone to show me photos. "Aaron is brilliant, accepted to several top universities already. Emma has been taking piano since she was 4, studying with one of the best instructors in the state. And Lucas, well, he's testing off the charts in mathematics." "They look happy," I observed, noting the designer clothes, the braces that had straightened their teeth, the confidence of children who had never questioned their worth. "They are," she confirmed, then hesitated before continuing. "But things have been difficult lately. Richard's business troubles have changed our circumstances dramatically." Here it was the real purpose of our reconnection. I waited, not making it easier for her. "Aaron has his heart set on Northwestern," she continued. "He's certainly qualified academically, but with Richard's parents cutting off financial support after the business failure, the tuition is out of reach." I remained silent, watching as she worked up to what she had really come to say. "I know this is a lot to ask, especially given our history," she said, leaning forward and lowering her voice. "But I understand you've done very well for yourself. I thought perhaps you might consider helping with Aaron's college expenses. He is your brother after all, even if you haven't met." The audacity left me momentarily speechless. After 25 years of complete absence, no birthday cards, no phone calls, not even acknowledgement of my father's death, she expected me to fund her son's expensive education. "Have you told them about me?" I asked, changing the subject. She looked startled. "Well, not exactly. The timing never seemed right, and Richard felt it would be confusing for them." "So they don't know they have a half-sister," I clarified. "They know I was married before," she hedged. "But no, we haven't discussed the details." I nodded slowly, pieces falling into place. "Let me understand this correctly. You left when I was 7. You never called, never visited, never acknowledged my existence to your new family. You didn't contact me when Dad was dying of cancer. You didn't attend his funeral. And now you want me to pay tens of thousands of dollars for a half-brother who doesn't even know I exist." Her face flushed. "I know it sounds bad when you put it that way, but we're still family. Blood is thicker than water, Aaron." "Is it?" I asked quietly. Because it didn't seem to matter much when I was growing up without a mother. "I made mistakes," she conceded, not meeting my eyes. "I was young and selfish, but your brother shouldn't suffer because of my choices." "Neither should I have suffered," I replied evenly. "But I did." She leaned forward, desperation creeping into her voice. "Just think about it, please. Aaron has such potential. Richard's parents used to cover all these expenses, but now they've cut us off completely. We're practically starting over. Like Dad and I had to start over after you left." I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Diana's expression hardened slightly. "I see James taught you to hold grudges," she said, a defensive note entering her tone. "He never could let things go." The mention of my father in such dismissive terms ignited something in me. "Dad never spoke ill of you to me, not once," I said, my voice low but intense. "He made sure I knew I could have a relationship with you if you ever showed interest. He worked himself to exhaustion providing for me alone. Don't you dare speak about him like that." She had the grace to look momentarily ashamed. "I'm sorry. That was uncalled for." I took a deep breath, centering myself. "I need some time to think about all this." "Of course," she agreed quickly, relief visible on her face at not receiving an outright rejection. "Take all the time you need. But Aaron needs to commit to a school soon, so if you could let me know within the week." I stood up, having heard enough. "I'll be in touch," I said, not committing to anything. As I turned to leave, she called after me. "It would mean so much to him, to all of us. Family should help family." Those words echoed in my mind as I drove home, a bitter taste in my mouth. Family should help family. Where was that sentiment when I needed a mother? Over the next week, Diana sent multiple messages, each more urgent than the last. Aaron needed to confirm his enrollment soon. The deposit deadline was approaching. Perhaps I could just cover the first year to see how it went. The increasing pressure only strengthened my resolve to establish clear boundaries. I also did some research looking more deeply into my half-siblings' social media accounts. What I found contradicted Diana's narrative of sudden hardship. There were recent posts showing Aaron and Europe Emma at an expensive horse camp Lucas with a brand new gaming setup. Their lifestyle had perhaps been downgraded, but they were hardly suffering. Most tellingly, I discovered that Diana had never mentioned my existence to them. In a post celebrating his parents' anniversary, Aaron had written about being so lucky to be their firstborn. Emma had tagged her whole family in a holiday photo that naturally didn't include me. After consultation with both my therapist and closest friends, I decided to meet Diana one final time to deliver my answer in person. I wanted to look her in the eye when I established this boundary. We met at the same cafe, though this time I arrived with a sense of purpose rather than confusion. Diana was already seated, a hopeful smile spreading across her face when she saw me. I sat down without preamble, determined to say what I had come to say. "I've thought a lot about your request," I began. "But before I give you my answer, I need to say some things I've held back for far too long." Her smile faltered, but she nodded for me to continue. "When I was 7 years old, I came home from school excited to show you an art project. Instead, I found you packing to leave us for a wealthier man. You promised to call, but you never did. Not once." Diana shifted uncomfortably. "I told you I was young and made mistakes." "Let me finish," I said firmly. "For years I waited by the phone. I cried myself to sleep wondering what I'd done wrong, why I wasn't enough for you to love. Dad worked multiple jobs to support me alone, coming home exhausted, but still helping with homework, attending school events, being both parents to me." I continued, my voice steady despite the emotion behind my words. "When I was 16, I got a job to help with bills. When I was in college, Dad got cancer. I took time off to care for him. Not once during his illness did you call or visit, though you must have known through family connections." I didn't think he'd want to see me, she protested weakly. It wasn't about what he wanted, I countered. It was about basic human decency, acknowledging someone you once claimed to love who was suffering. But you couldn't even send a card when he died, the man who raised your daughter single-handedly after you abandoned her. Diana's eyes darted around the cafe, clearly uncomfortable with my direct recounting of events. The past is the past, Aaron. I'm trying to move forward now. No, I shook my head. You're trying to use me as a financial resource without doing any of the emotional work required for genuine reconciliation. You haven't even told your children I exist. Her face colored. How do you know that? Social media isn't private, Diana. Aaron calls himself your firstborn. None of them mention having a half-sister. You've erased me from your narrative completely. She sighed, dropping the pretense. It was easier that way. Richard didn't want complications. I wasn't a complication, I said quietly. I was your child. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 25 years of absence between us. About Aaron's tuition, I finally said. The answer is no. I will not be funding his education. But he's your brother, she protested, desperation creeping into her voice. Half-brother, I corrected. A half-brother who doesn't know I exist because you chose to hide me. I'm sorry he's facing uncertainty about his education, but that's not my responsibility to fix. So you're punishing him for my choices? Her tone turned accusatory. No, I shook my head. I'm establishing a boundary. There are state schools with excellent programs that cost far less than Northwestern. There are scholarships and loans available. Aaron has options that don't involve extracting money from the daughter you abandoned. Diana's expression hardened. I should have known James would turn you against me. You're just as stubborn and unforgiving as he was. Dad never said a negative word about you. I repeated, anger flashing through me. But I have to wonder, if Richard's business hadn't failed, would you have contacted me at all? Or am I only worth acknowledging when you need something? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I am willing to meet my half-siblings if they're interested in knowing me, I added. That offer stands independently of any financial assistance, but they deserve to know the truth about why they grew up without knowing their older sister. You'd turn them against me, she accused. I'd tell them the truth, I clarified. They're old enough to form their own opinions. Diana gathered her purse clearly, realizing she wouldn't get what she wanted. You've become hard, Aaron. I'm disappointed. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. You forfeited your right to be disappointed in me when you walked out our door 25 years ago. As she stood to leave, I added, For what it's worth, I hope things improve for you and your family. But our relationship can't begin with financial transactions. It would need to start with honesty and genuine remorse, neither of which I've seen from you. She left without another word, her posture rigid with anger or embarrassment, or perhaps both. I remained seated, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The little girl in me who had longed for her mother's love would always exist, but the woman I had become understood that no relationship was better than one built on manipulation and lies. That evening, I drafted a carefully worded email to my half-siblings, finding their addresses through social media. I introduced myself, explained our connection, and offered to answer any questions they might have about our shared parent. I made no mention of Diana's financial request, focusing instead on the simple truth that they had an older sister who would be open to knowing them if they wished. To my surprise, the youngest Lucas responded within days. His message was cautious but curious, asking basic questions about my life and expressing confusion about why he'd never been told about me. Over the following weeks, we established a tentative correspondence. Eventually, Emma also reached out, though Aaron never responded. Through these exchanges, I learned that Diana had initially denied my existence when confronted, then reluctantly acknowledged me, but painted herself as the victim of my father's influence. It was clear from their questions that they had been given a highly edited version of their mother's first marriage and abandonment of her child. My relationship with Lucas gradually strengthened. Unlike his older siblings, he seemed to question his mother's narrative more openly. During one exchange, he admitted, "Mom has always been different with us than with her friends. more concerned with appearances than feelings. I can imagine her doing what you described. This unexpected connection with my youngest half-sibling became one of the few positive outcomes of Diana's reappearance in my life. While we were still getting to know each other, there was potential for a genuine relationship unencumbered by financial expectations. The healing process continued in other ways too. With my therapist's guidance, I worked through the renewed feelings of abandonment triggered by Diana's manipulative return. I channeled my experience into more active involvement with the mentoring program at my company, becoming a supporter for young people who lacked family backing in their careers. Perhaps most meaningful was the scholarship fund I established in my father's name at the local community college. The James Miller Memorial Scholarship specifically supported students from single-parent households pursuing technical education. It wasn't a huge endowment, but it helped a few students each year with books and supplies, continuing Dad's legacy of quiet generosity. I came to understand that forgiveness wasn't about excusing Diana's actions or even reconciling with her. It was about freeing myself from the weight of anger and hurt I had carried since childhood. Forgiveness was a gift I gave myself, not her. The family I had built around me, my chosen family of loyal friends, proved more valuable than biological connections that existed only on paper. Samantha remained my rock, celebrating my successes and supporting me through difficulties as she had since high school. My colleagues turned friends provided the daily encouragement and belonging that Diana had forfeited the right to offer. Most importantly, I carried forward the lessons my father had taught through his unwavering love and sacrifice. True family isn't defined by blood or obligation, but by consistent presence, unconditional support, and the courage to put someone else's needs before your own. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who only reached out when they needed something? Do you believe blood relation creates automatic obligation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who might need to hear they're not alone in navigating complicated family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember that your worth is never determined by those who fail to see it, and sometimes the family we create means more than the family we're born into.